Welcome to the 22nd day of the 25 Days of Flows, the Power Automate Advent Calendar. Today we're going to jump right in very quickly because we have limited time to cover a complex topic. So, what's going to save you, those of you that might be beginners or intimate, is the fact that you can download this flow. Download this flow, which I will give you actually two downloads today. The flow that we are building, as well as the flow it depends on, right? So that you have both. In the app, though, you're only going to get this flow. So pay attention to what we're doing here. We are going to use flow management to edit a flow description with a flow. Okay, this is extremely powerful, but it does require attention to detail because when you edit the description of the flow, it's kind of like you opened up the Visual Studio Code and you breaking down the different parts of the code, and nobody wants to really do that unless you're a coder. So breaking down the flow definition is easier in this flow management connector than it would have been for you to learn the code, but it still does take some attention to detail. And the connector we're focused on is flow management, and everybody gets that connector. Okay, so let's show you what I mean. So we're going to go directly to flow because we have limited time today. And there's two flows here. There's a flow that lists records. Okay, so I've done a button for both of these. And this one is a CDS connection. And all it's doing is listing the approval requests. So basically, I have taken the time to understand the entities related to approvals. And sometimes I talk directly to them. Understand that when you do that, you are using the CDS premium connector. And so that's a premium service. Okay. So I'm listing records that are in my entity called approval request. And this will show me basically all the approvals that have been sent out. Okay. I can add OData queries here and stuff like that. And you know that I often prefix my approvals with certain prefixes so that I can group my approvals by type or by purpose. I think I've discussed that before, so I won't go into detail on that. But what's important about this flow is that I added a comment right here. And I just did edit comment, and I said, this is my original comment. When you edit a flow definition, you can edit any part of these pieces that you're pasting together when you add actions and triggers, right? I'm going to focus on the comment in this demonstration, but that does not mean that's the only thing you can edit in the flow definition. And so a dependency for you to play with this flow is that you create some flow, and I would say it doesn't need to be CDS, but whatever it is that you get from, like, let's say you could do a get SharePoint, for instance, just add a comment to that first action, right? So just edit comment and type a comment here that's unique, like I use the word original so that you can see here's what it started as. Okay, originally it was, this is my original comment. Okay, after you have that flow, and that is a dependency, the next thing you're going to do with that flow is you're going to back it up. So you're going to do save as, and you're going to do just like this. You're going to do boom, 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 Control A, version 1, list records. This gives you a way to roll back when you mess up. I cannot overstress the need to back up your flow before you start learning how to edit its definition. Just in case something goes wrong, you have something you can roll back to. Because if you edit the definition incorrectly, you will corrupt the flow. And technically, I don't know how to explain that other than your flow won't work anymore. The trigger will go into a spasm and not work anymore. And you'll get this little picture of a wrench in your action or your trigger, you might have seen this before, and that means your thing is it's trash. Nothing you can do. And we don't have versioning and flow yet, so you would have to rebuild that flow to try again. So please note this very important suggestion. Before you edit flows through a flow management connection, before you edit the definition, back up the flow. And notice that's the first thing I did. However, I did not turn it on. All right. So my past versions are always turned off because I really don't want them to run. They are just backups. So I don't want them to run by accident or by me or anybody else running them. So I turn them off. And basically I don't have to, because when you do a save as, flow will Power Automate will automatically turn your flow off, because it's managing that risk that you have two automated flows running at the same time. They're doing the same thing, which is not good news. So we mitigate that risk by turning the flow off. But you do that. You make sure you do not turn it back on, because it is just a version reference. And so I always prefix all my backups with the word version. And then you can see that. I don't know if I have, no, but one of these days, I will basically show you how I manage versions from a browser perspective. So I can show you right now. So if this is the original flow, it's called the button list records. If I go to the details of this is my details screen. I'm gonna minimize my, okay, so here I am in Explorer. All right, now I bounce around in environments, and so not every environment I'll do this in, and the one that I'm doing the most important work, I will. All right, so what I'm going to do with this detail page is I'm going to add it to my favorites bar. Okay, so now that this is added to my favorite bar, and I will not leave it named whatever Edge thinks it, or whatever browser thinks it should be named. I will name it the name of the flow, button list records. Okay, so now I have that flow in there in my favorites bar. Now I back up my flow, and now that has a details screen. Okay, so now I'm going to add that also to my favorite bar, and it's going to be called version 1 list records, and that goes in my favorites bar. Now what I want to do is I want to make it underneath the flow I added before, which, what happened to it? Favorites bar. Sorry, looking for my flow. And if I can't find it, you know, it depends on which browser, how easy bookmarks are. But I'm going to go into my options here so we can see them. I'm going to go to favorites. And yeah, I think this is a little bit easier in other browsers than this one right here. So I'm going to look for the one that I just added, which I know I just added it. What happened? There it is, button list records. And I will add a folder for this. So create new folder, button list records. And now I'm putting this guy in that folder. So hold on, let me go back to my, I will talk to you about that later, but let's go back to our favorites. And I want this first one in there. So I'm moving it in there. And now when I add the version, so we have a backup of this, which is called version 1, okay? In this, I'm going to add this to my favorites bar as well, and make sure I put it in that folder we just made. And you can probably tell that I'm not usually using this particular browser. But no worries. There's my button list records. I want to put it in there. Okay, now because I've got a folder, my original flow is in there and my versions are in there. Now in my favorite bar, if I click on button list records, I will see all of them. Now I forgot to rename this. Not a problem. I can go and into my favorites and rename it. So, and this is just me getting used to a different browser experience on this. So I'm just going to rename this version 1 list records. So what you can see from this process, even though I might not have done it as smart as I should have as far as the order of things I did there, what I end up with is a folder in my favorites bar that says the main flow. This is the current flow. And then every time I save a version, I add that to my folder, same folder. So what I end up is with one folder in my favorites bar that has my current flow and all its past versions. And so I can always roll back to a previous version. And I'll let you know that I usually do my versions like daily, for instance, every day. If it's a really complex flow that I'm, kind of working hard to get it right, I might do it by milestone. And what I mean by that is, okay, I was working on the SharePoint actions and now that's in a scope and it's done. Okay, let's save it before we start doing the CDS connections that we need to move that data from SharePoint to CDS, right? And so I'll save after CDS is set up. Now maybe I need to do some approvals or some notifications. I might save after I've got that set up. So I'm saving based on scopes or day, right? And then I end up with folders that say version 1 through 15, right? And so I can always go back to the previous versions, see what I did, so forth and so on. And this probably should have been a separate video, but that's how I manage my versions. And so in my flow, I don't really need to use this UI right here to find the versions that are related to the flow, because I'd rather see it in the folder like this. Now, one of the things that Stephen recommends is that you use solutions for this purpose. And you can do that as well, because the solution kind of pretends to be a folder, and then you would bounce from solutions to find your stuff. But I actually like the browser. That's just me. Stephen likes solutions, which is probably the best thing to do because, he's been using this product way longer than me. But I like to use the favorites bar. And it reminds me of something similar that I learned from one of our big MVPs, who is Serge, who manages his flows really well using his browser. So it's just you get used to your browser, all right? Okay, so why did I divert there? Because it is really important, if you hear nothing else, that before you try doing this flow, you back up the original flow, okay? So just because I talked so much, I just want to remind you that in this flow, on the first action, we have a comment, okay? Now, let's go look at the second flow. And the second flow is the one that's going to change the first flow. So this is the flow that's going to go retrieve the definition of this flow that we just looked at and closed and backed up and everything. And then we're going to rebuild the definition dynamically to change that comment. Because I'm going to take you into, let's do this list records. Well, let's look at that get flow. I'll show you the last run that we had so you can see the definition. When you get a flow using the flow management connector, you get a flow definition. You also get a whole bunch of other stuff like the connection references. This is really huge if you want to batch change connections, right? You get your triggers, you get your actions, you get a bunch of stuff, okay? So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this definition out and let you look at it in Visual Studio Code. So I just pasted it in here. And here's what we're going to do. We need to change the comment. So if you look at this JSON, what you will find, you can do a search for comment, right? And it'll help you find it. So this is where the comment is kept in this thing called description. And it says, this is my comment. Now notice there's two descriptions. One, which is under actions, because here's the action that we're dealing with, list records. And here's the description that has our comment. But we also have a description for the actual flow. And this is where this hierarchy matters. Where these indents happen tell you more. So this description is under the schema itself, the parameters of the flow. So it is the description of the flow. So if I go to this flow's details, so we're going to go back to the flow we're talking about, which is list records, and we're going to look at the details. The description is get a list of records related to approvals. And so that is a higher level description in the JSON because it refers to the whole flow. Whereas this description right here refers only to the action list records. And if I had more actions in here, you would see all of the actions, all right? And so I kept it simple because this is something new you might be learning, and I want to help you kind of work through it. And when I learned flow and when I work through it, because I'm continuing in my journey to become a master flow ninja. But in doing that, I kind of have to work through simple components, study the JSON, learn what it does, and then I build on what I know. So I don't start big and then drill down. I start small and then I grow up, right? And this helps me kind of acquire knowledge. So I kind of suggest you do this, you know, get a simple flow, understand the definition of that simple flow, understand how to read that JSON, and now you could build on this, right? Now you could change other things, all right? So let's look at the flow again. And of course, I can do other videos about this. This is our just quick 25 days of flows. So we want to change this comment right here, which happens to live in the JSON in a description parameter under actions for list records. And so this is why I love Visual Studio Code, because you can tell what the hierarchy of the JSON is. All right, and one day maybe we'll talk about that further. All right, so let's go back to the flow and get that get flow here. And let's just look at what's happening here. So it's a button, so I'm just going to press it when I'm ready. But this could definitely happen in a process, right? Let's suppose you have a process for getting invoices approved. And I don't know, I'm not going to use a comment as a common thing to need to change. But in this process, if the invoice is denied, we might want to add a comment to something in the flow that says, okay, invoice was denied. Whereas if it's approved, we might want to change that comment to invoice has been approved here, right? Or something like that. So think of the fact that your process can drive changes to a different flow, and then you can use child flows to call that flow that you've edited. Okay, think about that for a minute before you move on, okay? So you can have a process that branches to a child flow, but in order to use that child flow, we might need to change the definition of it first. It's very exciting, right? But hold on to your nuggets, because there's so much more to this, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and get that flow. By getting that flow, I have to pick what environment it's in and what the flow name is. You can see this is the list records. And now I'm going to start playing around with this definition. Now, the definition itself could be copy and pasted into here, and you can manually edit that flow, but don't do that. Don't do that, because now you're hard coding your flow. It's a temptation because it's a lot easier to just hard code it, but it's not a good practice. Everything that's changing in your flow should be happening dynamically, and this will give you enterprise scale as opposed to hard coding things and having to touch them one by one. All right. So the first thing I'm doing here, and what I did was I took this expression and I put it in a comment so that you could see the expression better than hovering, which shows it to you, but small. I have really bad sight. So these little hovers, they drive me crazy because I can't zoom them. They stay small no matter what zoom I'm at. And so I will copy the formula from the expression area. And then after I copy it, I will add a comment and paste it there. Now, what you do need to understand kind of seems a little bit opposite to what I just preached to you about, is this is hard-coded. So if I change this and forget to update my comment, I can confuse other people. So if you make a change to these things and for some reason that one's not showing. Okay, so when you click on a pink, it shows up in the expression area over here. If you make a change over here, then you have to remember to change your comment if you keep this practice that I have here. But really, this is only for training purposes. It's not for real life. In real life, I would not copy the expression there. I would explain the expression there. Like I would say, okay, this step is doing this. And then people know what I'm doing. Because seeing the expression, probably not going to help them much. But I use it for training because, like, again, I can't see this hover. It's too small for my eyes. Okay, so basically what I'm doing first is I'm attacking this description because it's at the top of the code. It's at the top of what I want to get done. And basically when you're looking at it in adjacent, it's at the bottom. So you're moving up from the bottom and you're kind of rebuilding this definition. So first you set your description, then you're going to set your whatever else goes up above it, and you keep going. So you'll notice I have an action for description, an action for the actual list records action, that particular action, and an action for the actions in general. And then I'm at the top now, I'm at the definition. And what I'm doing each time, if you look at this carefully, is I'm building on what is going on. So I'm at the bottom of the JSON right now, and I'm setting the description from being the original comment to say the new comment, right? And of course, I can change this to whatever I want. So if I scroll over here, well, actually, this one's not showing for some reason. But I could copy it from here. I'm just going to cheat and copy it from here and then click in here. And I believe it might be just too long. Yeah, it might be that it's very long. There it is. Okay, so it's very long and so it wasn't showing in there. And that does happen. So I'm going to go back using my buttons in my keyboard to get to the new comment. And I can change this to the 25-day comment. All right. But I need to remember, to the point I was saying you, not only to click update, right? But I also need to edit this comment right here. Okay. So that it has exactly what I did. All right. And that's only because I want to use this comment field as a teaching tool. You don't have to do that. Okay. All right. So now the first thing I did was change the description to the 25-day comment. So now I'm going to take that description and push it into the next level of hierarchy, which is list records. So if we go up and we look at description, if you go straight up that line, the next indent out is list records. Okay. So then in list records, I'm going to not change anything, but put the outputs of description. So remember, I'm rebuilding this description. So I need to put the new description under list records. Then if I go up that hierarchy again, so you go up, the next one out is actions, right? So now I do in the actions, I'm going to put inside of that the list records, which includes the description plus list records. And then finally, I'm done, basically, because there isn't anything that indents out from that. So I can be done, all right? So I'm going to, in that last one, have the actual definition, which is basically the actions with the outputs of list records, which includes the outputs of the description, right? And so you just build on it. Don't feel bad if this seems complicated. It slightly is. But once you get it, oh my God, you become closer to ninja. Honest, all right? So now I'm going to choose update flow because this is now my new definition. This last action represents my new definition. And so I'll add the update flow action from the flow management tool. I will go ahead and pop in there the flow display name, which came from the get. So this particular flow, right, the action right here, gives me everything that I need, such as the flow display name, right? And you can search for it. I know I often forget to search, but you can just type one of the words and it will narrow it down. There's my flow display name. Pop that in there. Where's my flow definition? It's right here because it's a composite of all those things we just built. Then I can decide if I want to start it or end it. Now, in this case, I don't care about connections, so I'm not going to replace them. I'm going to leave them right where they are, but this is where my connections would be. And you would pay attention to what you see in your flow management tool related to connections. All right, so these are the connection references, and this is the ID for the connections. All right, so we're not going to worry about them because we don't want to change them. We did a flow like 2 days ago where I showed you how to use flow management to replace connections. Go ahead and use that. It's the same story. All right, so let's test this guy. I didn't really change anything. I think I changed it to the 25-day comment, so I did make a change. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back to my flow and just, again, if you remember, our flow has a comment that says, this is my original comment. So now we're going to run the flow that we just made, what we just walked through, and you will be able to download this flow. And this is the one that's going to make the changes. All right, this is the flow we're changing, list records. This is the one that's making the change, which contains the flow management connector. All right, so the flow is started. Let's go watch it run. Okay, it looks like it ran. Notice that if I open up definition here, what's in this definition should match what we saw earlier, except the description should be different. So if I do file new, place this in here, look at that. You see that the description is different? Where'd JSON go? All right, so we changed this through the description, not by opening the flow and editing it, which we could have done. But imagine you have a process where you want to automate these changes. This is where this becomes extremely powerful. All right, so let's go check our flow and just edit this. And look, our comment is changed. Guys, trust me, this is really very useful when you get into managing multiple flows, complex flows that have conditions that can change which flow you need and how that flow needs to be working. When you get into those more complex business scenarios, this kind of thing is very important to you. So if you are new with flow, I don't suggest you jump into these waters right here. I suggest you go to the question mark and you go to learn and you go through some of these modules here before you start thinking about changing flow definitions. It's okay to be a beginner for a while. There's no rule that says you ever have to leave being a beginner, right? However, if you're responsible for very, complex flows that cross many systems and that are critical to your business, you'll need to grow up from this beginner stage. And we help you with some modules that are for even complex flows and some modules for admins. And then all of our MVPs like Serge and John Liao, they're all trying to share with you value that you can grow up to. But I don't suggest that in your first week of learning flow, you start trying to edit definitions. But once you get to that intermediate place where you're ready, you'll know it and you'll be able to jump into these waters. I really wish you a happy holiday, and I can't wait to talk to you tomorrow as the Power Automate Advent Calendar continues. Have a happy holiday.